salt-crusted rocks of the Yemeni coastline cut into Staff Sergeant Marcus Reaper Castellanos' knees as he pressed his eye against the scope of his Mk-11 sniper rifle. 300 meters below, the compound sprawled like a concrete cancer against the desert, its whitewashed walls gleaming under the relentless afternoon sun. The intelligence had been solid. Too solid, perhaps. High-value target confirmed, minimal security, weather window optimal. Everything had fallen into place with the kind of precision that made seasoned operators nervous. Overwatch has eyes. On. Reaper whispered into his throat mic, his voice barely audible above the whisper of wind through the jagged terrain. Tango 1 is mobile in the courtyard. Count 4, no, 5 tangos with AKs on the perimeter. Looks like our birthday boy is getting ready to leave the party. 2 clicks to his east, Lieutenant Commander Jake Prophet Morrison adjusted his position behind a boulder that had probably been sitting in this god-forsaken stretch of nowhere since before Christ walked the earth. The SEAL team, 6 leaders. Weathered face was a mask of concentration as he processed the intelligence flowing through his earpiece. 36 years old, with more confirmed kills than he cared to remember and a chest full of medals he never wore, Prophet had learned to trust his instincts above all else. Right now, those instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. Copy. Overwatch. Prophet's voice crackled back through the comm system. Weather station confirms clear skies for the next 6 hours. No air traffic reported in our sector. We are go for Thunderbolt. The operation had been months in the making. Hassan al-Durrani, the man they'd come to collect, wasn't just another terrorist financier. According to the spooks at Langley, he was the spider at the center of a web that stretched from the poppy fields of Afghanistan to the banking towers of Dubai. His capture would unravel networks that had been bleeding American soldiers dry for the better part of a decade, the kind of prize that made careers and ended wars. Prophet's team was positioned in a semicircle around the compound's northern approach, the only route that didn't involve crossing 2 miles of open ground under the watchful eyes of the lookouts. Chief Petty Officer Danny Wraith Santos lay prone behind his Barrett M82A1, the .50 caliber rifle tracking lazy arcs across the compound's main entrance. To his left, Petty Officer First Class Tony Ghost Ramirez had his hands wrapped around an M240 machine gun, its bipod legs dug into the sandy soil. The newest member of their squad, Petty Officer Second Class Kevin Rookie Chen, crouched behind a saw, his young face tight with the kind of nervous energy that came with your first real-world operation. Spotter to Overwatch, came Wraith's gravelly voice, seasoned by too many cigarettes and not enough sleep. I've got movement on the south wall. Looks like a patrol route. 2 tangos with RPGs making the rounds every 12 minutes. Prophet processed this information with the cold efficiency that had kept him alive through 4 deployments. The timing was crucial. They had a 40-minute window between satellite passes, and al-Durrani's convoy was scheduled to depart at 16:30 hours. It was now 15:45. Everything had to happen fast and clean. All stations, this is Prophet. Weather confirms clear skies, no air assets in our operational area. We are initiating Thunderbolt in T-minus 10 minutes. Overwatch, I need continuous eyes on that courtyard. The moment al-Durrani steps foot outside that building, you sing out. Roger that, Prophet. Target is still mobile in the courtyard. Appears to be... Wait. Reaper's voice carried a note of confusion that made Prophet's blood run cold. In their business, confusion got people killed. Prophet, I'm seeing something weird here. Al-Durrani just pulled out what looks like a satellite phone. He's looking up at the sky. The wind chose that moment to shift, carrying with it the acrid smell of diesel fuel and something else, something that made the hair on the back of Prophet's neck stand up. It was ozone, the kind of smell that came before lightning strikes, but the sky above them was crystalline blue, not a cloud in sight. Overwatch, confirm your previous. Target is looking at the sky? Affirmative. And Prophet. There's something else. The guards aren't taking cover. They're all looking up too, like they're waiting for something. Prophet's mind raced through the possibilities. Had they been made? Was this an ambush? The intelligence had been triple verified through multiple sources. There was no way Alderani could have known they were coming. Unless... All stations, maintain positions but be ready to abort on my command. Something's not... The words died in Prophet's throat as a sound reached his ears that had no business being in that clear, empty sky. It started as a whisper, barely audible, above the desert wind. Then it grew, building into a low rumble that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the sound of turbofan engines at full military power, but there were no aircraft on the scope. The nearest coalition airfield was 300 miles away. What the hell? Ghost's voice crackled over the comm, tinged with the kind of fear that came from facing the unknown. The sound grew louder, more focused, until it became unmistakable. The distinctive whine of General Electric TF-34 engines pushing a Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II through the air at attack speed. But that was impossible. Every air asset in the region had been grounded for their operation. The sky was supposed to be clear. Prophet pressed himself deeper into the rocks, his training warring with his disbelief. The A-10 Warthog was designed for close air support, built around its legendary GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon that could turn a tank into scrap metal in seconds. But this one wasn't on any flight plan, wasn't squawking any identification, and sure as hell wasn't supposed to. Be here. All stations, this is Prophet. We have an unidentified A-10 inbound to our position. I say again, unidentified Warthog inbound. All personnel take cover immediately. The aircraft appeared as if materialized from thin air, screaming. In from the south at barely 100 feet above the deck. Its twin engines howled like banshees as it banked hard left, presenting its profile to the SEAL's position. Prophet could see the pilot's helmet through the cockpit glass, but something was wrong with the aircraft's markings. Where there should have been USAF roundels and identification numbers, there was nothing but matte gray paint. Jesus Christ! Rookie's voice cracked over the comm. Where did that thing come from? The A-10 didn't answer any radio calls. It didn't identify itself on any frequency. It simply lined up on the compound below like a predator that had found its prey, its nose dipping toward the earth in the unmistakable attitude of an attack run. In the courtyard, 300 meters. Below, Hassan al-Durrani raised his satellite phone to the sky like some kind of twisted benediction, and Prophet realized with crystalline clarity that they had walked into something far more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. The A-10's first pass was a reconnaissance run, but Prophet knew that wouldn't last long. The Warthog banked sharply to the right, its titanium bathtub cockpit glinting in the desert sun as it began a wide circle around the compound. Through his scope, Prophet could see the pilot's movements. Precise, calculated, professional. Whoever was flying that bird knew exactly what they were doing. Prophet, this is command, crackled a voice through the encrypted satellite link that connected them to the Joint Operations Center in Qatar. We show no friendly air assets in your sector. Repeat, no friendly air assets authorized in your operational area. Copy. Command. Then whose damn plane is that? Prophet's voice carried an edge of frustration that his men rarely heard. In 15 years of special operations, he'd never encountered anything like this. The answer came not from command, but from an unexpected source. Al-Durrani's voice, speaking accented English, suddenly filled their communications channel. Somehow, impossibly, the terrorist had hacked into their encrypted frequency. Good afternoon, Lieutenant Commander Morrison. Al-Durrani's voice was calm, almost conversational. I trust you and your team are enjoying the hospitality of my country, though I fear your stay will be briefer than anticipated. Prophet felt ice crystallize in his veins. Not only did Alderani know they were there, he knew Prophet's rank and name. This wasn't just a compromise. This was a complete intelligence failure of catastrophic proportions. "Overwatch, do you have a shot?" Prophet whispered, switching to a backup frequency. "Negative." Reaper's response was tight with professional frustration. "Target has moved inside the main building. Too many walls between us now." The A-10 completed its circle and lined up for what was unmistakably an attack run. But instead of targeting the compound, it was heading straight for the ridge where the SEALs lay hidden. Prophet's blood turned to liquid nitrogen as he realized the impossible truth. The aircraft wasn't here to support Alderani. It was here to eliminate. Witnesses. All stations, emergency displacement, move now." Prophet's command cut through the comm chatter like a blade. The team reacted with the fluid precision of men who had trained together for years. Wraith grabbed his Barrett and rolled behind a boulder just as the A-10's nose lit up with muzzle. Flashes. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon unleashed its fury at 4,200 rounds per minute, each 30mm round capable of penetrating tank armor. Where the SEALs had been positioned seconds before, the rocky ridge exploded into fragments and dust. Ghost sprinted toward a dried riverbed, his machine gun clutched against his chest, while Rookie dove behind an outcropping of sandstone that looked like it might stop a strong breeze, let alone depleted uranium rounds. The A-10's cannon fire walked across their former position like the finger of God, turning solid rock into powder and sending shrapnel screaming through the air. "What the hell is happening?" Rookie's voice cracked over the radio, the bravado of youth shattered by the reality of being hunted by their own country's aircraft. Prophet had no answer. His mind raced through possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Had they been declared rogue? Was this some kind of black operation gone wrong? Or was something even more sinister at play? The A-10 pulled up from its attack run and began another circle. Through his binoculars, Prophet caught a glimpse of something that made his blood freeze. The aircraft's serial numbers hadn't just been painted over. They'd been completely removed and replaced with different markings. Markings that looked suspiciously like those used by a certain private military contractor that officially didn't exist. "Prophet, this is Reaper. I've got movement in the compound. Multiple vehicles, looks like a convoy forming up." Of course. While the A-10 kept them pinned down, Alderani would slip away into the desert. It was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. But Prophet wasn't ready to accept defeat. Not yet. All stations, sound off. Status report. Wraith, operational. Minor lacerations from rock fragments, but I can still shoot. Ghost, green. That thing missed me by inches. Rookie here. I think I wet myself, but I'm alive. Overwatch is mobile. And pissed off, came Reaper's voice from his elevated position. Prophet allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. His team was intact, but they were far from safe. The A-10 was lining up for another attack run, and this time the pilot would know exactly where they'd taken cover. That's when Alderani's voice returned to their frequency. And what he said changed everything Prophet thought he knew about their mission. "Lieutenant Commander, before my pilot reduces you and your men to their component atoms, perhaps you'd like to know why you're really here. You see, Hassan al-Durrani died 3 months ago in a drone strike in Pakistan. Quite thoroughly, I'm told. The man you've come to capture is actually CIA operative David Chen. Was CIA operative David Chen. He's been running my network for the past 18 months, and now he's outlived his usefulness." Prophet's world tilted on its axis. David Chen, Rookie's older brother, the agency spook who'd gone dark in Yemen last year. The brother Rookie had joined the SEALs to avenge. "That's impossible," Prophet breathed, but even as he said it, pieces began falling into place. The too perfect intelligence, the convenient weather window, the fact that every detail of their insertion had gone exactly according to plan until the moment they'd achieved eyes on target. Nothing is impossible when you have the right people. "In the right places, Commander. Your Rookie there, did he ever mention that his brother was quite talkative before he died? quite eager to share details about SEAL Team 6 operations. Family loyalty is such a powerful motivator. Prophet's gaze snapped to Rookie's position. The young SEAL was pressed against his cover, his face a mask of confusion and growing horror. Either he was an Academy Award-caliber actor, or he was just as shocked as the rest of them. The A-10 completed its turn and began its final approach. This time, there would be no warning shots, no reconnaissance passes. The pilot had their positions locked in, and 30mm depleted uranium rounds didn't care how good your cover was, but Prophet had one card left to play, a card he'd hoped never to use. "Reaper, do you still have that stinger we're not supposed to?" "Have? Roger that, boss. But if I light up a U.S. aircraft, that's not a U.S. aircraft anymore," Prophet said grimly. "That's a weapon being used against American servicemen. Take the shot." As the A-10 screamed in for its final attack run, Prophet realized they weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting to expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the intelligence community, and the only way to survive was to bring down an aircraft that, officially, was never supposed to exist. Reaper's hands moved with the fluid precision of a man who had fired shoulder-launched missiles at everything from helicopters to armored vehicles across 3 continents. The FM-92 Stinger had been liberated from a Taliban weapons cache in Afghanistan 6 months earlier, a souvenir that Prophet's team had agreed never to mention in their after-action reports. Now, as Reaper armed the infrared seeker and brought the weapon to his shoulder, that bit of unofficial procurement was about to save their lives. "Stinger's hot." Reaper's voice was steady despite the 75,000 pounds of death bearing down on their position at 300 knots. "Seeker's locked. I've got tone." The A-10 was less than 500 meters out when Reaper squeezed the trigger. The Stinger's solid rocket motor ignited with a sharp crack, sending the heat-seeking missile streaking toward the incoming aircraft on a tail of white smoke. For a heartbeat, Prophet thought they might actually pull this off. Then the impossible happened again. The A-10's pilot didn't attempt evasive maneuvers, didn't deploy flares, didn't even try to pull up. Instead, the aircraft's defensive systems that no A-10 Thunderbolt had ever been equipped with, activated with clinical precision. A directed energy weapon, invisible to the naked eye but devastating in its effect, reached out and detonated the Stinger missile harmlessly in midair. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," Ghost whispered over the comm. "What kind of bird is that?" Prophet had no answer. The A-10, he knew, was a robust, reliable ground attack aircraft built in the 1970s. It wasn't supposed to have defensive laser systems that wouldn't be operational on frontline aircraft for another decade. Unless... The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just any A-10. This was a test bed, a prototype equipped with experimental systems that didn't officially exist, which meant whoever was behind this had access to black-budget projects and technology that made the stealth bomber look like a crop duster. The modified A-10 pulled up from its attack run, but instead of circling for another pass, it began broadcasting on an open frequency, a frequency that every military unit within 100 miles would be monitoring. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Air Force Flight Designation Hotel 77 declaring emergency." The pilot's voice was calm and professional, with just a hint of manufactured urgency. "I am taking ground fire from terrorist positions. Request immediate support for downed American aircrew." Prophet's blood turned to ice water. In 30 seconds, every coalition aircraft in the region would be vectoring toward their position. F-16s from the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing. Apache helicopters from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Even British Typhoons from RAF Akrotiri would come screaming in to assist a downed American pilot. Except there was no downed pilot. There was only a SEAL team that would be vaporized by friendly fire before they could explain that they were the good guys. "Command, this is Prophet. Emergency authentication Bravo 77 Alpha. The aircraft claiming to be in distress is hostile. Repeat, the A-10 in our sector is hostile and is attempting to vector friendly fire onto our position. Static filled. The communication channel. Then, after an eternity that lasted perhaps 3 seconds, Command's response chilled Prophet to the bone. Prophet, this is Command. We show no SEAL team operating in your sector. Authentication, Bravo 77 Alpha, is not recognized. Unknown station, cease transmission immediately. They'd been erased. Officially, Prophet and his team didn't exist, had never existed. Their mission records had been wiped, their authentication codes invalidated. Whoever was behind this conspiracy had just pushed a button and made 4 highly trained special operations soldiers disappear from the face of the earth. All stations, we are officially ghosts. Prophet's voice carried a deadly calm that his men recognized as his combat voice, the tone he used when the situation had gone beyond FUBAR and entered the realm of the biblically screwed. Whatever's happening here goes all the way to the top. Trust no one outside this team. That's when Rookie's voice cut through the tactical chatter, and what he said changed everything once again. Prophet, I need to tell you something. About my brother David. Not now, Rookie. We've got inbound friendlies who think we're hostiles, and my brother isn't dead. The words hung in the desert air like a physical thing. He called me 3 days ago. Said he was coming home soon. Said his mission was almost complete. The A-10 had completed another circle and was beginning to climb, gaining altitude for a high-speed egress. In the compound below, Prophet could see vehicles moving toward the main gate. The convoy was preparing to depart, and with it, whatever answers might explain this nightmare. But Rookie's confession had opened a new and terrifying possibility. If David Chen was alive, if he was still operational, then either he was the deepest cover agent in CIA history, or Rookie. Prophet's voice was deadly quiet. When your brother called you 3 days ago, did you tell him about our mission? The silence that followed was answer enough. Prophet closed his eyes and felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a shroud. His youngest team member, a kid he'd trained and trusted, had unknowingly compromised their operation. Had provided the intelligence that allowed their enemies to set up this elaborate trap, had given them the details needed to hack their communications, invalidate their authentication codes, and erase them from official existence. I didn't know. Rookie's voice was barely a whisper. I thought he was CIA. I thought he was one of the good guys. In the distance, Prophet could hear the sound of approaching aircraft, F-16s, judging by the pitch of their engines. They had maybe 2 minutes before this desert became a free fire zone. But Prophet had spent 15 years in special operations learning that impossible situations required impossible solutions. And looking at the modified A-10 as it climbed toward the setting sun, he realized there was one card left to play. The aircraft might have experimental defensive systems, but it was still built around the same basic airframe as every other A-10. And Prophet knew something about A-10s that their mysterious enemies apparently didn't. Wraith, do you still have that Barrett? Affirmative, boss. How do you feel about threading a needle at 800 meters? Through his scope, Wraith studied the climbing aircraft. The A-10 was designed to take massive amounts of battle damage and keep flying. Its engines were mounted high and separate to prevent ground fire from taking out both simultaneously. Its cockpit was surrounded by a titanium tub that could stop small arms fire, but there was one vulnerability that no amount of armor could protect against. Prophet, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, that's a 1 in a million shot. Then, you better make sure you're the 1 in a million, Chief. As Wraith chambered a .50 caliber BMG round and began calculating windage and elevation, Prophet realized they were about to attempt something that had never been tried in combat. They were going to try to disable a heavily armored ground attack aircraft with a single sniper rifle shot. And if they missed, 4 American warriors would disappear into the desert sand. their sacrifice unknown and unremembered, victims of a conspiracy that reached into the darkest corners of their own government. Wraith's breathing slowed to the rhythm of a man preparing to make the impossible possible. 800 meters, crosswind from the southwest at 12 knots, target climbing at approximately 15 degrees, airspeed estimated at 280 knots. Any sniper instructor would have called the shot mathematically impossible, but Wraith had stopped believing in impossible during his third tour in Afghanistan. "Talk to me, Wraith." Prophet's voice was steady despite the sound of approaching F-16s growing louder by the second. "I've got the shot lined up," Wraith murmured, his eye pressed against the scope. "But Prophet, even if I thread this needle, that bird's gonna come down hard. If there are any innocents in that compound." "There are no innocents anymore," Prophet replied grimly. "Everyone down there is part of this. Take the shot." The Barrett M82A1 bucked against Wraith's shoulder with the distinctive crack of a .50 caliber BMG round breaking the sound barrier. The massive bullet, a match-grade boat tail designed for extreme long-range precision, streaked across the desert sky on a trajectory that would intersect with the A-10's flight path in exactly 2.3 seconds. Wraith hadn't aimed for the engines or the cockpit. Those were too well armored, too protected. Instead, he'd aimed for something much smaller, much more vulnerable. The pitot tube extending from the aircraft's nose. The small device that measured airspeed and fed crucial flight data to the pilot's instruments. The .50 caliber round struck, the pitot tube dead center, shearing it off cleanly. Instantly, the A-10's airspeed indicators began providing false readings. The aircraft's fly-by-wire systems, dependent on accurate airspeed data, began making automatic corrections based on faulty information. The A-10 shuddered, its nose pitching down as the flight control computers tried to compensate for what they perceived as a dangerous stall condition. The pilot, suddenly fighting an aircraft that no longer knew how fast it was flying, struggled to maintain control. "Holy shit," Ghost breathed over the comm. "He actually did it." But their victory was short-lived. The modified A-10, even crippled, was still a formidable weapons platform, and its pilot, whoever he was good enough to maintain enough control for one final attack. The aircraft's nose swung toward the compound below, its GAU-8 cannon spinning, up for a devastating strafing run. But instead of targeting the SEALs, it opened fire on the building where Hassan al-Durrani was hiding. The 30mm rounds punched through the concrete walls like they were paper, turning the structure into a collapsing ruin of dust and debris. Secondary explosions, probably ammunition or fuel stores, sent pillars of flame and smoke climbing toward the clear blue sky. "Target eliminated," the A-10 pilot's voice crackled over the radio, calm and professional even as his aircraft bucked and shuddered through the sky. Mission accomplished. Then the crippled A-10 began its final descent toward the desert floor, trailing black smoke from its damaged control systems. Prophet watched through his binoculars as the aircraft impacted the sand dunes 3 kilometers to the south, cartwheeling in a spectacular explosion of fuel and ammunition that could probably be seen from orbit. When the smoke cleared, there would be nothing left but twisted metal and unanswered questions. The approaching F-16s were less than a minute out when Prophet made a decision that would either save their lives or damn them all. "All stations, prepare for emergency extraction. We're going down to that compound." "Boss," Ghost's voice carried a note of concern. "That place just got turned into hamburger by a 30mm cannon. There's nothing left." "There's always something left," Prophet replied. "And right now, evidence is the only thing that's going to keep us alive." The team moved with practiced efficiency, bounding from cover to cover as they descended toward the smoking ruins. The sound of jet engines was growing louder, but Prophet calculated they had maybe 90 seconds before the F-16s arrived on station. The compound was a scene of utter devastation. The main building had been reduced to rubble, and secondary fires were burning throughout the complex. But in the basement of the destroyed structure, protected by 3 feet of reinforced concrete, Prophet found what he was looking for: a communications center that had survived the attack. Banks of sophisticated radio equipment, satellite uplinks, and, most importantly, hard drives full of encrypted data. "Rookie, you're our tech guy. How long to crack this encryption?" Rookie, still reeling from the revelation about his brother, stared at the computer systems with the hollow eyes of a man whose world had just collapsed. "These are military-grade systems, Prophet. Could take weeks, maybe months." "We don't have weeks. We have about 30 seconds before those F-16s turn this place into a parking lot." That's when Reaper's voice crackled over the comm from his overwatch. "Position. Prophet, you need to see this. I've got movement from the crashed A-10. The pilot survived." Through his scope, Reaper watched as a figure in a flight suit struggled out of the wreckage of the experimental aircraft. The pilot was limping, favoring his left leg, but he was definitely alive. And in his hand, he carried something that made Reaper's blood run cold. A detonator. "Prophet, the pilot's got a dead man's switch. Looks like this whole operation was designed to self-destruct." Prophet's mind raced through the implications. If the pilot triggered that detonator, whatever evidence remained in the compound would be vaporized. The conspiracy would die with them, buried under tons of desert sand and classified beyond any hope of exposure. But then Rookie did something that surprised everyone, including himself. The young SEAL, the kid who had unknowingly betrayed his own team, stood up from the computer terminal and pulled out his sidearm. "I know that pilot," Rookie said quietly. "That's Captain Marcus Webb. He trained my brother David at the farm. They worked together for 3 years." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with horrifying clarity. David Chen hadn't been turned by the enemy. He'd been recruited by a rogue element within the CIA, a shadow organization that operated beyond oversight, beyond accountability. They'd used him to funnel intelligence to terrorist networks, not to help America's enemies, but to create justification for military actions that enriched defense contractors and expanded covert operations budgets. Hassan al-Durrani hadn't been a terrorist financier. He'd been an accountant, keeping track of money flows that would have exposed the entire conspiracy if he'd ever testified before Congress. And the SEALs hadn't been sent to capture him. They'd been sent to be eliminated, their deaths blamed on. A terrorist ambush that would justify even more military spending, more covert operations, more of the endless war that kept certain people very, very rich. "Rookie," Prophet's voice was gentle but firm. "What are you going to do?" The young SEAL looked at his team leader with eyes that had aged a decade in the past hour. "I'm going to do what my brother should have done from the beginning. I'm going to choose the right side." As the F-16s screamed overhead and the sound of rotors announced the arrival of Apache helicopters, Rookie Chen walked out of the ruined compound with his hands raised, carrying a hard drive full of evidence that would either clear their names or damn them all. But in his other hand, invisible to the approaching aircraft, he carried something else, a backup drive containing every detail of the conspiracy that had tried to erase them from existence. The war wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning, and this time, Prophet and his team knew exactly who the real enemy was.